So now we will start assembling the engine. Now the first thing we will do, we will insert the bearing, crank bearing here. To press the crank bearing, we have to place this crankcase flush to the table surface. But while doing that, this dowel is coming in the way. Because of this dowel, this is not sitting flush with the surface. So we will remove this dowel and then we will press the crank bearing. Before pressing the bearing, just lubricate this surface. This is the bearing. The bearing number is 6304C3. We'll also lubricate the bearing. Hit the bearing with the hammer evenly so that it goes nice and square with the surface, and press it till it is flush with the crankcase surface. Now we will press the oil seal. This is the oil seal. Also one thing, don't forget to put back the dowel which you removed. This dowel also fell from this side. So this dowel is from here. This is the magneto side. So this is the bearing for the magneto side. The bearing number is 6205. So this is the part where the bearing number is inscribed. So I am keeping it towards me. tracking number is 6304. Now we will press the oil seals. There is a dowel here, so I will just adjust my wooden planks. So now it is stable. This is the oil seal for the magneto side. I have elevated the crankcase enough so that we can install the crankshaft. So this is the crankshaft. This side of the crankshaft goes in here. This is the magneto side. So as you can see, the crankshaft is properly seated in its position. So now we can start assembling the gearbox. So in the gearbox there are basically two shafts. One is the main shaft. The main shaft is connected to the clutch housing. This is where the clutch will fit in. And second is the drive axle. The drive axle is connected to the small chain sprocket. This is where the small chain sprocket will fit in. On either of these shafts there are some gears which are free to rotate, like this. These gears are free to rotate on the shaft, and 1 and 2, these are called dog clutches. These dog clutches are splined to this shaft, so when this dog clutch rotates, it rotates the shaft also. And on the main shaft, this gear and this gear is fixed to the main shaft. This gear is free to rotate, and this is the dog clutch. This dog clutch, as you can see, is splined to the main shaft. So now in the gearbox, these two shafts are assembled likewise. So now let's see how the gearing works. This is the first gear, second gear, third gear and fourth gear. When we actually shift into first gear, we shift this dog clutch to this side, and this engages, as you can see, into first gear. So this is where the clutch is. The power will come from here to this gear to the first gear, and via the dog clutch, as these two are engaged, via the dog clutch to the main shaft and to the sprocket. So now the second gear, while we shift into second gear, this dog clutch will move here, and this dog clutch will engage into this gear. So now power will come from here to this gear to second gear to the dog clutch, and dog clutch to the sprocket. Third gear is when we shift this dog clutch to this side, and this dog clutch will engage to this third gear. The power will come from here to this dog clutch to the third gear via this dog clutch, transfer power to the small sprocket, and this is how we will get third gear. So now the fourth gear, this dog clutch will move here in the middle. So this dog clutch is neither engaged with this gear or this gear, and this dog clutch will engage with fourth gear. So now power will come from here to dog clutch to the fourth gear to this dog clutch, and this dog clutch to the sprocket, and this is how we will get fourth gear. So this is how the gearing works basically, and the power is transferred from gear to gear. Now the shifting of these dog clutches is done by these shift forks. These are called shift forks. Two shift forks here, one shift fork here, and the shift fork operate via this cam. So this is the cam where there are 3 tracks made. This track and this track is for first, second and third gear, which operate these 2 shift forks, and the middle track is for fourth gear, which operates this shift fork. So this is the overall working of the gearbox. So now that is understood, let's assemble the gearbox. The 2 bigger shift forks are for the drive axle, that is for the first, second and third gear, and the small shift fork is for the fourth gear, that is for the main shaft. These are the 2 guide bars. The longer one is for the left side, that is for the drive axle, and the shorter one is for the right side, that is for the main shaft. Now to assemble a cam, we'll first set aside the guide bars and the shift forks so that we can insert the cam. Now insert the shift forks in their respective tracks. This shift fork goes into the middle track, and these 2 shift forks into the either sides. Now we will check that everything is working. So this is the first gear, second gear, third gear, and the fourth gear also. Perfect. So now we can put the other half of the crankcase. While putting the gasket here, make sure that this mating surface is completely clean and free of any old gasket material. Now there are a bunch of people who don't use this gasket in between the crankcases. They will just use this gasket maker and seal the crankcases. Originally you are supposed to use a sealant called Yamaha Bond, but that sealant is never available at any spare parts shop. So what I would like to do is I like to use this gasket and also this gasket maker. This gasket maker I will apply on the other half of the crankcase, so that I am doubly sure that oil from the gearbox is not leaking and also not leaking into the combustion chamber. So now I will use this silicone gasket maker onto the other half of the crankcase, and then we can seal both the crankcases. Tight the bolts in the crisscross pattern. Tight all these screws with the impact driver. So if you see this gear, there is one edge which is beveled and one edge is not. So this gear goes like this, so the beveled edge is on the top. We will tighten this nut later. While installing the kick shaft, this stopper rests here and this spring goes in here. Also one thing, install this spring here at this point only, because when you install the clutch, you won't be able to turn this spring from here because the clutch will be in the way. So before installing the clutch, install the kick shaft and install the spring. So these are the new friction plates. In one box of this you will get only 5 friction plates, but in the clutch pack there are 6 friction plates, so you have to buy one separately. So first there goes a friction plate. There will be a side on which there will be some letters and number inscribed. That side should be up. This is the clutch plate. Also on the clutch plate there will be one side where these teeth are rounded, and on the other side these teeth are not rounded. Here you can see this is rounded, this is not. So this should be up. Now to tighten these bolts fully, insert a 1 rupee coin in between the crankshaft gear and the clutch gear. Now to tighten this crankshaft nut, we need to lock the crankshaft. For that, I have inserted a T here. Now we will install this neutral stopper ball and the spring. Here, for that we have to remove this bolt. So before assembling the piston, cover the crankcase with a cloth. This is precautionary so that nothing will fall inside the crankcase, because अगर कुछ भी इसके अंदर चले जाता है while assembling तो हमें वापस पूरा crankcase खोलना पड़ेगा उसे निकालने के लिए. To remove the piston rings, just expand this. निकल आएंगे. So these are the new piston rings. So there are two piston rings. Both the rings are identical, and you can put any ring on the top and other in the bottom. But if you look at the rings closely, there are these two small slots made on the either side of the piston rings. The side where the slots are is the top side. So this is the top side and this is the bottom side. So while installing the rings on the piston, the ring will go like this. The second purpose of this slot is to properly locate the rings on the piston, that I will show you in a moment. Before installing the rings, we will lubricate all the rings, the piston and the connecting rod. I am using a 2T oil to lubricate this and not the engine oil. This is the small end bearing. So while installing the piston, remember that this arrow on the piston should be on the exhaust side, that is on the front side of the vehicle. So the piston will go like this. Now we will install this circlip. Now we will install the piston rings. The piston rings have to be aligned on the piston as per the marking given. So this is the marking for the top ring, this, and for the bottom ring, this is the marking. So the piston rings will go like this, so that they will align with the small pin that is provided here. While installing the rings, don't expand the rings too much, that will damage them. You have to slightly expand them to get them on. Now you can see that these two slots made on the rings will fit in the small pin provided in the piston. That pin will prevent the rings from rotating all around when the piston is working. Same thing for the top ring, just slightly expand this. Okay. Now that the piston rings are installed, we can go ahead and install the block. But while doing that, you have to remember two things. First is you have to compress the rings so that the block can fit in. And the second most important thing is, while you compressing and installing the block, you have to make sure that the ring does not shift from its alignment. This is the gasket kit. Tight these bolts in a crisscross pattern. So we'll first tight this, then this, then this, then this.